There comes a time in anyone's career when they find themselves face to face with a person that's so wildly, incomprehensibly disrespectful that it's a surprise they could even think positive thoughts about anything. This was one of those days. I, Ambassador Froggy, a school teacher in my early life before moving on to politics. This was my second deployment, and I was hoping all would go well. It did not. Now, I suppose I should provide a little context. I am an exhale. We're an avian species with 2 pairs of wings and 6 arms. We're pretty small, no taller than 4 Terran standard feet on average, and typically weigh around 90 to 120 Terran pounds as well. Considering this, most humans find us to be incredibly adorable, and were we not an intelligent species like them, I'm fairly certain we'd have found loving homes amongst the humans as beloved pets. A strange thing to think about, honestly. It fills me with conflicting emotions, but that's a topic for another time. My opposite is the ambassador for the Kenkrake, Minister Bongale. The Kenkrake are large, cephalopod-esque and generally unpleasant to be around. They float typically when in motion, thanks to gas-filled internal sacs, which allow them to adjust their elevation on a whim. Their faces, as I have heard described by many humans, resemble that of a fictional deity known as Cthulhu, which leads me to wonder if perhaps the Kenkrake once visited their people in the distant past. Maybe. Yet again I get sidetracked. My apologies. Where was I? Oh yes, Minister Bongale. A most unpleasant person, self-absorbed, rude, and generally of the mind that the Kenkrake were the superior life form, even if all evidence pointed to them being one of the weaker species, biologically at least. We were scheduled to meet aboard a neutral station, and I was dismayed to learn that my normal security contingent had been incapacitated after contracting Vectari fever. Most unpleasant of fate, as the humans say. They'd be firing out of both ends for several weeks at minimum. Which leads to me replacing my security staff with an all-human one, on loan from the Navy. Apparently these Marines were getting bored and that was a bad thing, so they were given something to do. I was the something to do, it seems. Not that I minded at all. I have a great love for humans, after all, for I have spent my days as a teacher teaching young humans about the wonders of the galaxy. What a time that had been. Why, there was this one time. No, I shouldn't get distracted. Focus on the event, Froggy. The event, not the past. I conversed briefly with my new guards, and was delighted to learn that some of them had been former students of mine. Apparently they had quietly volunteered their squad for this assignment because of me, which was a very touching thing to hear, I shall admit. Still, I was not looking forward to this meeting at all, and I think they knew it, as they repeatedly asked me how I was feeling and if anything was wrong. I denied the latter, of course, and said I was perfectly fine, quite healthy for my age, and certainly mentally sound. Nothing to worry about. I don't think they believed me, but they didn't press the matter, much to my relief. Either way, I had a job to do, and so when we had finally docked at a station, the humans called Nova Terminal. I was fully prepared for the meeting, or so I had thought at the time. Introductions went well enough. They usually do when dealing with the Kenkrake, but as expected, it all went south immediately after that. I was subjected to near constant belittling, insults against myself and my species, against my human companions, and just a myriad of different things that contributed to the air of general unpleasantness. Still, I kept my beak shut and powered through it. That is, till the very end. We were currently working at the issue of renegotiating some old trade deals, ones that needed to be reworked thanks to ever-shifting industries, and the cost of gathering the requisite materials for trade. Minister Bongale was quite aggressive in his attempts to twist the deal in such a manner that would solely benefit his people and bleed mine dry. But I don't think he really expected me to counter him in ways that did the same thing, just in a nicer and somehow friendlier way than his version of the deals. When he finally noticed this, after almost agreeing to my particular terms, he flew into quite the rage. "You insolent slime! How dare you try to besmirch my glorious people with such a one-sided deal? You truly are as untrustworthy as many have said. Your people are categorically inferior to my own, and such an attempted insult to our vastly superior intelligence is unbelievable. And I have been so forgiving as to ignore the human filth in this room as well. To bring such a lowly species before a high and noble being such as myself is tantamount to blasphemy." Bongale's roaring was cut short by an armoured fist slamming into the table, which caused me to jump and even squawk, much to my embarrassment. It would seem one of my marine escorts had crossed the space between the door and the table in several quick strides, unable to watch as I was berated so thoroughly. They must have known it would result in punishment later, or worse, court-martial perhaps, yet still they did it, and we were subject to some of the most scathing, humbling remarks I have ever heard from a human being, especially one that I had last seen as what the humans called a toddler. "Listen here, you duck-nosed taint-hammer. The quips about humanity I can stand, but don't you dare talk shit about this finely feathered beacon of civility. Compared to him, you're little more than an insufferable fly-bitten wretch. And let's not even talk about your face. Compared to this beat visage, you look like a poorly made Cthulhu knockoff. Even an eldritch deity couldn't comprehend the mess that is your face," they began, pausing only to gulp down a lungful of air. Now listen here, you Bongale began, only for the Marine to jab a finger at their face. "No, you listen. This man has more patience than a Sakari ambush shark. This man has done more for this galaxy than you ever will. You're nothing but a collection of wasted gases with the ability to think, and even that you do poorly. So sit down, shut up, show some damn respect, and agree to whatever this man says. Or so help me, I'll be adding a few more bladders to your anatomy." The Marine straightened, clearing his throat and nodding, as the Bongale slowly lowered himself into a seat, flabbergasted by the ferocity of the human before him. His guards, however, were only just reacting, their weapons starting to rise so they could show this impudent whelp his place. But then we all heard it. The sound. A sound that is in every human action drama, every combat video game, and even their commercials sometimes. It was the sound of a shotgun racking around. The only other Marine in the room hadn't even raised their weapon, just loaded a shot and stared down the Ken Crake guards. The Ken Crake went still, each showing a look that spoke volumes. The last time the Ken Crake had been at war, it was with humanity, and they knew very well now the damage one of those weapons could produce against their species, as the pellets had a habit of not outright killing them, but instead tearing apart the bladders which kept them in the air. Their weapons lowered, and the Marine relaxed slightly, giving a nod, as the other returned to his post. Having regained my wits, I glanced at Bongale, who sat quivering in a most amusing fashion, and though I sported a beak, I managed to produce something eerily close to a human smile. "So, shall we go over the details again?" I asked. Later, having secured a very generous deal that would benefit us both, though my people certainly got the better side of it, I was privy to the chewing out that the Marine was receiving from his superior. His companion stood nearby, stoic and seemingly thinking about something rather deeply. I paused beside them, and they immediately came to attention, snapping off a salute which I politely waved away. "Tell me, if you please, why did you do that? It wasn't necessary," I asked, and the Marine thought about it for a moment before coming up with a response. "Well, you see, we can, for the most part, ignore insults when they're thrown at us. Most don't really stick because we accept them as valid criticism, mostly. Some take offense easier than others, of course, but mostly we just shrug and go about our day. But when it comes to friends, or even someone we consider family, that's when things change. You were there in his formative years. You left a lasting impression on him, and from what he's told me, you were something of a father figure. So even with all his self-control, he simply couldn't stand by and let you get walked over like that. Besides, it was better than the alternative, they said, and I nodded, digesting this information quickly. I would have to ask why he thought I was a father figure, but that was a question for later. What was the alternative, if you don't mind me asking? I was curious, and the Marine snorted softly just as the door across the hall opened and allowed the sufficiently chastised Marine to exit. "We'd have started shooting, and some poor soul would have to clean up Kincrake bits," he stated, sending a shiver through my feathers as he gave me another salute and dismissed himself. The other approached with a mortified look on his face, but when he drew within arm's reach it faded, and was replaced with a soft smile. "Sorry about earlier, Ambassador. I don't normally lose my cool like that."
"All is forgiven, and off the record I am glad you did. If you hadn't, I was afraid I might have sullied my own career by pecking out his eyes or something." We chuckled. "So, your companion mentioned something earlier. He said that you see me as a father figure."
This earned me a sheepish look, and the Marine cleared his throat several times. "Well, you see, my dad died when I was 2. It wasn't nearly as tough on me as it was for Mum, but later on I started wishing he was still around. I wasn't mad at him or anything, mind you, just wished he hadn't died." He paused, shaking his head before continuing. "Anyway, when I made it into your class, you were exactly what I'd always wanted for a dad. I guess, subconsciously, I started seeing you that way. A familial figure of sorts, even though you were a completely different species and all. Oh, that's not weird or anything." I digested this, clacking on my beak a few times before I shook my head.
"Not weird, but certainly unexpected. I thank you for your honesty, and for your timely intervention earlier. It meant a lot."
I paused, thinking.
"I must ask, though, is this a trend amongst your species? The standing up to others like you did? I'll admit, for all my time amongst your people, I have neglected my studies of them."
He nodded, rather vigorously. "Oh yeah, totally. We do it all the time," he grinned, thumping his chest plate with a fist. "We're humans. We don't take shit from anyone."